Welcome everybody to this exciting discussion on quality. Should be lively and full of sparks. We have some wonderful personalities here, people with strong reputations and strong views. And as we know, quality's been a very hot topic. A lot of different discussion has gone on in real life, online, different events. And here we're bringing together some of the strongest and most passionate voices together to talk about quality. Just so you're all aware, as the participants, we will ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, spend a couple of minutes just sharing a perspective on quality, and then we'll start to have some discussion, some debate. And my role will be to draw out a few threads, perhaps shine a couple of contrasts, certainly comment on some similarities, and then we'll move through a discussion. And towards the end, we'll introduce the concept of the quality pledge that you might also have heard about, what that means and what we're trying to achieve with it, and just get some thoughts around that. The Q&A is enabled, so please participate, throw your questions in. We will certainly use them. We have a few questions. I'm pretty sure we're not going to be short of ideas and thoughts from the different panelists. So without any further introduction, we will get started. Just so you know, we're going to go in the order of Caroline, Tia, Lisa, Melanie, Joaquim, and Mihkel. So on that basis, I'll ask Caroline to spend a couple of minutes introducing themselves, and I apologize in advance if I end up interrupting people because we've got a lot to get through in only 1 hour.
Well, I'm Caroline Frankum. I'm part of the Kantar executive team. Kantar is one of the world leading market research agencies. We work with 98 of the world's top 100 most valuable brands. So we have an accountability to ensure that the data we provide to our clients truly reflects the diverse world we serve and is good quality, trusted data. So real responses from real people who are who they say they are. I'm very passionate about this topic because we have seen since the post-COVID world a big shift to lots of complexities, a triangulation of three things: an increasing fight for eyeballs. So, we're up against the likes of TikTok, Netflix, Amazon. Who really wants to fill in a survey in this day and age when there's still only 24 hours in a day? Data privacy legislation is changing inconsistently from one market to the next. China have just announced some new API-related PIPL rules, so we have to keep on top of that. And the third thing, of course, is we are seeing an increase in fraud since COVID. So online fraud, we'll get into the details on this, but it has grown exponentially over the last 3 years. And I think we have a job to do as an industry to be more honest about that, be more upfront about that, and also help clients solutionize on it. So that's me. Back to you, Dan.
That's great. And yes, certainly look forward to diving into some of that in a bit more detail. Now, Tia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Welcome, everyone. My name is Tia Maurer. I work at Procter & Gamble. I don't think I have to tell everybody that you have our products in your home, I'm sure, or anything about the company. I think I'm the only person representing brands on the call. I have worked both as a supplier within the four walls of P&G. Years ago, I ran a research facility for the company for the fabric and home care division. And that is when I started to see people who tried to run the screener and get into studies so that they could get compensation for things that they did not qualify for. And I also brought online surveying to the company back in the early 2000s. And so my radar has been up, and I approach every data file like it's a crime scene. I think that this has been going on for a long time. And I think some of the systems that suppliers have put in place to optimize, costs on their side has perpetuated the issue on our side. I think that brands have been blind to this because they've done full service research for years. At P&G, we've dig in our own data files and analyze our own data. We don't ask for a file from the supplier with a bow on it with a PowerPoint presentation. But I think that the emergence of DIY software where everyone can be a products researcher or a market researcher allows everyone to see the data. And I think now you're seeing it's more and more fraud. It is growing. And I think people are seeing the fraud now that they weren't seeing before due to the full service aspect.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, really, really interesting. Like you say, the often for all sorts of reasons, there's been a bit of a blindedness around it. So we'll dig into that a little bit more. Lisa, please share a few thoughts.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Lisa Wilding-Brown. I'm the CEO of Innovate MR. We are a large global sampling company and field services agency. We have samples and panels in consumer healthcare and with a strong focus on B2B, which I think is important to note because B2B is also a very, very high target for those that have incredibly nefarious intentions. Totally agree with Caroline and Tia in that fraud has really continued to accelerate it, just as the online methodologies that we all lean on have matured over the years, so have the folks that are looking to circumvent the various layers that sample providers and agencies are using. I've been studying quality for my entire career. Started off at Harris Interactive, helped to build out the Harris Poll, and then moved over to the sample sector in 2009. So I've been in the space for, gosh, over 20 years now, and have been studying fraud and the various permutations related to quality. It's not just those that exist on the very end of the spectrum that, are doing this at scale, doing this almost as a job. But, in the middle of that spectrum, you might have people that are over-indexing, hyper-aware, hyper-satisfied, using every product and suffering from every ailment under the sun. They may be real humans, but they are not the genuine survey respondents that we're looking for. Totally agree with Tia's take. I think there has been an incredible amount of CPI compression in our space over the last few years. I don't think we're thinking about the sample universe and what it is to engage a true, real, high-quality participant. So I know we don't want to get too deep into price. I always remember Mel saying, don't get too deep into price, but I absolutely believe price is at the center of what we're dealing with. I actually just embarked on a pretty robust mystery shop, Dan, my pricing against my competitors, and I was floored, absolutely shocked at how much the prices have gone down in the last 12 months. And I think that is absolutely correlated to the also rise in quality complaints. I'll leave you with this comment here. I always say this and I stand by it. Quality isn't expensive, it's priceless. It really, truly is. So I'll stop there and hand it back to you, Dan.
That's fantastic. And we've got one of the earliest shareable quotes as well. Quality is priceless. Love it. As Scott, who's in the background, told us, this is going to be awesome. And he said that we're going to get some golden content, and we're already there. So fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, Melanie, please introduce yourself and share a little around your thoughts.
Thanks, Dan. And hi, everyone. I am super happy to be here. I am the CEO of the Insights Association, trade association for the United States. I have been in this profession for a really long time, about 3 decades now, and have had the pleasure of working with everybody on this call. So it feels a little bit like a meeting of friends as much as a meeting on quality. I have worked on quality my entire career. Everyone who knows me knows that this is sort of a core brand aspect of Melanie Courtright. I've worked on all kinds of quality, from sampling and fraud to sample frame, river versus panel. I ran that first test ever on river versus panel versus phone. So you guys all have me to thank for that part of joyful part of our lives, but also survey design and analytics and cleaning and the whole gamut of quality. It's a big umbrella, and we're probably going to talk about just a couple of those things that sit underneath data quality. But I like to remind everyone that data quality is end to end. You have to start with the design and the intentions of the study and go all the way through to what you do with the data and find biases all along the path. So, it's a complicated and complex problem, but one that this industry is best suited to solve. And we have the talent in our profession to do much more than we're doing today. So in my role now as the CEO of the Insights Association, and in partnership with other global associations, it's time for us to really do something more than talk about it. I don't want to admire the problem anymore. I don't want to look at it and gander at it. I want to do something about it. And so that's where I think we are as a profession. And I think we've done some things over the last year, but we have a lot more to do. And I'm excited to take the journey with you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melanie. Again, this is really exciting. And thanks for reminding us as well around the end-to-end nature of it. Just to mention to all those participating, we've already had a couple of questions arrive. Please, if you've got questions, if you've got objections or thoughts, throw them in. We'll do our best to make sure we cover everything during this discussion. And those that we can't, we'll absolutely take away and give the panelists a chance to provide a written response. And we'll either address that by sending out an email blast or some kind of blog post. So we will get to everything. And yeah, please keep posting thoughts, comments, challenges, questions. And now over to you, Joaquim.
Thank you, Dan. It's also my pleasure being here. And as per my accent, you will see I'm not English native speaker, so bear with me. Please give me some more time if I need it. I might speak slowly. Joaquim Bretcha, Director General of ESOMAR for the last year. ESOMAR has been working on quality since the beginning in 1947, because we, as a self-ruled organization, self-ruled promoter of the industry, ethics has been key in everything we have been promoting, and quality is totally related to ethics, and the code of conduct and so on. I like to say that now that we are getting into this new magic era of artificial intelligence, our industry and our professionals, we have an excellent opportunity to shine. We need to shine. Why do I say that? Because we are at the beginning of this era that is totally speculative. Now we are in a moment in which artificial intelligence is more treated like a magic new kind of thing, more than science or technology. And I believe that we need knowledge and criteria. And this is something that our professionals have been shining on for all these decades. We have been experts on managing data, on treating personal data with ethics. We have been ruled and guided by the codes of conduct of our profession, and we have been capable of reaching good conclusions and informed conclusions thanks to good data, all based in good and quality data. This is why this topic is so important, because in a moment in which data is at the center of all decision making and all the machine learnings of the whole world, we cannot be ruled by bad data. We cannot make decisions based on bad data. So it's our responsibility. I know that you are going to talk a bit about the responsibility of the associations and the institutions of the industry, but I like to remind, and I like very much introduction of Lisa, that this is a market landscape challenge, and markets and forces are crucial to make things move towards one side or the other. So this is a combined effort of the industry, institutions, and all players in this industry to make things right. So I'm very happy to be in this debate.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joaquim. And as always, yeah, I've told you before, but your English is excellent. So you certainly don't need to apologize for anything. We understood you clearly, and your pace is awesome. And so is the content. Yeah, thanks for that. And yeah, very much looking forward to getting more perspective as the conversation goes on. And finally, as part of the introductions, Mihkel, please introduce yourself and share some comments on quality.
Hello, everyone. Mihkel, founder, CEO of Realeyes. I guess we're the only kind of tech company in this group, but we're also a user of service in a very important way. So important for us from two perspectives. And I'd go back to what Carolyn said about being passionate about this topic. I mean, there's many reasons to be passionate about it, but one is just that it's just fascinating in my experience what the difference on what people say and what people do here in this whole topic of quality is. I mean, everybody agrees that quality is important, but there's a lot of space on what people are actually doing about it. I guess there's more being done about it, but still there is a lot of room between those two things of what people say and do. And hopefully, I mean, this conversation here today is part of starting to wrap this up a bit. I wanted to share also a story of how we ended up in this quality space, because I mean, we're sort of a computer vision company more than anything, but we've also been running an ad testing product for years. So we've seen over, I mean, 10 million surveys, right, over the last couple of years. So not as big as some other companies on this panel and call, but still enough to get a direct feel of what's going on in the market. And building on what Joaquim said is that AI's opportunity to shine. We ended up in this quality because of one big customer order that we got, which required a lot of sample, but it also required the requirement to prove that all of these are unique people, because AI model want high quality data. And so we did it. It was a large study, and what we learned, we basically turned our own technology into measuring the quality for the first time ever. And we ended up having to buy 2.5 surveys to deliver one unique person, and that was shocking for us, and got us into thinking, you know, maybe there's a piece of this puzzle that we can help solve here for everyone. But I want that story to be a positive, because the price thing that Lisa said is critical. I think we higher quality is worth so much more in multiples than what it costs to resolve it. And that AI study was just one proof. You know, yes, we had to buy 2.5 people, but we could charge a lot more by making it high quality. So there is a way to charge higher for quality, and we'll all figure out different ways to do it. And it has to be part of going out of it and getting to a better place for everyone. So just to wrap up, my thoughts on this is that I see kind of like a three-body problem. I don't know if you watched that Netflix series. Three-body problems are complex, but interesting, and these have been covered, right? And the first issue is tech. You know, researchers have been behind fraudsters. This cat and mouse will go on forever, but tech is one problem that we need to kind of take a step forward. Pricing is key. Right now, it's all mixed up, good and bad. It's not clear for buyers on what is a business class sample and what is a cheap sample, and this is a missed opportunity. I think some other industries have done differentiated pricing much better than service. So if we figure that out, then everybody wins, because there's need for both, right? There's high quality and low price. And the final piece of it is, I guess what the pledge is about is transparency, which I believe is the way to get to higher prices. Because right now we don't have transparency. We don't have data that we look at all the same way. We have a lot of promising sell slides, but that's not transparency. Data is transparency. So let's get more of that. And ultimately, I think learning also from others who've done it well, and I'm pointing here to advertising industry, which is close to us, that transparency should ideally be there at transaction level, right? Because, you know, if you say you do something, but then you actually don't use it on a study that you deliver, then the trust breaks down. So more transparency, more data will lead to higher prices, and using the best tech will get this whole industry out of low price problems that we have, and enable customers to make those better decisions that Joaquim was us guiding towards. So
Fantastic.
those, yep.
Thank you, thank you, Mihkel. There's so much there from those intros. We could kind of dive into any one or several of the topics that you've all raised. So like any good discussion, I'm now going to sort of react a little bit on the fly, because there's a common theme in the questions that people have been posting, which if I sort of try and summarize them, essentially is, what can we do about it and what should we do about it? I think that there's additionally there are some important comments to react to, but we'll perhaps do it outside of this call, on how have we got ourselves into this mess. You know, some of you have alluded to that, and why have we realized now that it's such a big problem? You know, particularly if it's been going on for, you know, Caroline, you said, you know, maybe the last sort of 3 years or so, it's really grown. Of course, it's been around forever, but it's really grown. But let's focus more on the today and the tomorrow. So what can we do and what should we do? Oh, and maybe, you know, what are you doing? And again, there are some suggestions within the questions that people have made. But if we try and kind of keep it sort of quite simple, what can we do? What would you like us to do? What should we do? What are we doing? You know, that sort of stuff. And to also keep it simple for ourselves, we'll, at least for now, follow the same sort of flow. So if that's good with you, Caroline, you go first. And then as we go through the others, don't feel you need to repeat what somebody else has just said. It's more if you've got something to add, and that'll allow us to make good use of time. So yes, to you, Caroline, what are you doing? What should others be doing? What can we do?
Well, thank you. Just picking up on what Mihkel said about data and transparency. So we've been doing a lot of work analyzing the marketplace first and foremost, using real data to understand what does the landscape look like. And from that data, what we found was of all the quality flags issued last year, 69% of them were actually fraud. But underneath that, there's lots of different types of fraud. There's not one single type of fraud. So of that 69%, 49%, the largest contributor to fraud, is actually coming from these big offshore centers in the likes of Syria, Venezuela, India, and they act at pace and at speed. So this is where AI can be used as a purpose for good, and I'll come back to that. 13% is coming from bots. 7% is coming from ghost completes, and a ghost complete you can't pick up in your survey data because they don't actually fulfill the survey. They just come in at the beginning and at the end to steal the rewards. And then 8% is duplicate respondents. So that gave us a framework to work with, and we knew that we hadn't done enough work in Kantar Profiles, which is Kantar's proprietary panel provider. We supply all the online sample for the Kantar work and for external clients directly too. We knew we hadn't done enough to amplify our deep 20 years of panel expertise with technology. So we bought QME. We spent millions investing in buying not an off-the-shelf anti-fraud product, but something that we could tailor to the complexity of the surveys that we do, because we do a mix of DIY surveys, complex longitudinal surveys. We have very complex sample frameworks that we have to deal with. So if you're having to do 2.5 surveys to get one real respondent, as Mihkel was, that's a challenge for us. So we acquired QME, and the reason we acquired QME back 2 years ago now was they had built deep neural networks. They trained and built these models for 5 years on all their panelists' behavior. So we were already right off from the starting blocks. And our anti-fraud software is a system called Cubed. What that gives us is we are able to monitor in real time panelists coming in and out of joining our panels and going into surveys. What Cubed enables us to do, this is a real data point, is identify 2,000 respondents coming in every day to take a survey who are bad actors, fraudulent, not real people, and not who they say they are. So Cubed, because the machines and the deep neural networks and the algorithms that we operate off are able to see the patterns in data very quickly, we are able to get them out very quickly. Because if you let these bad actors come in and play for more than a couple of seconds, they do serious damage to your data. So number one, AI can be a purpose for good. It's a big buzz topic at the moment. Use it as a purpose for good. We've invested a lot of money in doing that. And that enables us to own our own quality and evolve our algorithms as and when we need to. In full transparency, we were attacked by a big offshore center at the end of last year. And it was bad people who were largely from Syria and India, pretending to be lots of 19-year-old CEOs in the group. But anyway, because we had access to a respondent level ID, we were able to identify their respondent tag and pull them out. And we were able to fix that in 14 hours, which was phenomenal. And we didn't lose or damage one single client detrimentally to the fact that the project was no done. So you've got to move at speed if you're going after the majority of these fraud actors that work at speed, work in huge teams, and are always looking at getting better, because we have to stay one step ahead. This is never going to be over. We have to keep thinking, how do we make it so difficult for them to get into our surveys and join our panels that they just give up? So that's what we're doing here in Kantar. We've spent millions on it. We are able to be more flexible and work in the moment. But again, going back to my point about there's not a one size fits all, because there's not a one type fits all type of fraud. China's very different. So in China, we have to use techniques like SMS verification, because we have to know that they have a bank account linked to a real phone. You can only have one phone in China. So there's not a one size fits all, but what we're trying to do is, first of all, deal with this cohort, this 41% of the real fraud, by using AI as a purpose for good and continually learning and evolving our deep neural networks that have been running on billions of behavioral data points now for 5 years. So it's a big investment. And that's why I like the point about, if we keep squeezing CPIs in our sector, first of all, panelists are just going to not want to bother, and all you will get is bad actors just wanting to do any survey to steal rewards. But secondly, we won't be able to afford to keep investing in the technology that we need to stay one step ahead of the fraudsters.
That's fantastic. So, yeah, I mean, really tough. You spent $1 million. Lisa said quality is priceless, and at the same time, yeah, I mean, we don't all have millions to spend, but we don't want to be paying piddly incentives, and we do need to pay and respect people's time who are taking the time to give us, really important information. Thanks, Caroline. Now, over to you, Tia. Same question. What can and what should we be doing to address some of these issues?
Yeah, this is a tough one. As Carolyn had said, fraud. As soon as you solve for one, it's like whack-a-mole. Another fraud, jumps up with some new way of scamming the system. I like that we say price is at the heart of this, but I'm conflicted on this one, and it's not because I sit at a brand where we're paying the bill, right? I look at this and I say, when they started offering $600 a week during COVID for unemployment, there were all kinds of fraud actors out there. My brother had unemployment taken in his name and he wasn't unemployed. And then when he got laid off, he couldn't get unemployment and he needed a blood sample from God and to show his birth certificate and everything else. And he never did get paid unemployment when he truly was off because someone else was getting his unemployment. So where there's money to be made, there's going to be fraud. And where there's big money to be made, there's going to be big fraud. So I'm a little bit conflicted on the price issue, not because I'm a brand and we're paying, but because I know that when there's big money to be made, there's big fraud. So I don't know if that just encourages the fraud even more so if we're passing that on to the person collecting incentives. P&G's kind of been on this path for a long time where we have employed True Sample when it first kind of was early in the days of online surveying. We wrote that into our contracts that if anybody was going to be providing us data, they needed to have True Sample turned on so that we could make sure that we were mitigating as much fraud as we could. The efforts that I've put in place, have been what can we do on the back end? As I look at it and we say, how are we going to solve it? It's hard, it's hard for brands to see that they should have to have any part in solving the problem. And the reason being is if I am a consumer, which I am in this case, and I'm coming to a supplier as if they're a car salesman and I'm buying a car and I'm sold a lemon, I should not have to be a mechanic to fix the lemon. I just shouldn't be sold a lemon. And I do know that I've put a lot of things in place on the backside, but even suppliers that I've worked with have tried to cover things up. And I will give you an example. When I get a survey, when I get data back from a survey, if it wasn't a DIY survey that I've programmed, they've taken the start time and end time out because they don't want me to know how long the person spent taking my survey. I do know that we've put things in place where I've run 5-minute surveys and I've had fraud in my 5-minute surveys. So I'm told, well, it's your problem. You run too long of a survey. Okay, I'll run a shorter survey. I still have fraud in my shorter surveys. So, I'm hard pressed to understand how the brand should be part of the solution because we're not the ones who necessarily created, the problem. I don't know, what to do other than put things in place on the backside to try to strain out any of the people who are inattentive or fraudulent or look for patterns and spend hours upon hours before I analyze my data set. So, I'm willing to lean in. I don't know what leaning in looks like other than one of the things that P&G has done is we've actually relied on expert panels via qual suppliers. I'm running a quant study right now. I'm doing it with a qual supplier who has validated panelists. And I made sure they weren't pulling from the exchange because I feel like when people are validated and we know who they are and it's who they say they are and they have a real address where they can be sent an incentive, then I'm getting better quality data at the end. And the only other thing that we've done is build our own panels and used our own panels of people that we know are real people on referral and that sort of thing. And it may get to that where P&G just runs their own, sample and stops relying on the exchanges and some of the suppliers.
That's really, really interesting. So, I mean, one of the things I heard, which is potentially quite controversial, is it's not our problem to fix. And I'm paraphrasing, it's not, I know you didn't say that. And then equally, you're saying it's so bad that we've had to build our own panels. And if we get time, we'd love to understand sort of what measures are in place that you can trust your own panels more than you can trust others. But before we get into that, let's go over to Lisa. Same question: what can and what should, and what are you doing?
Yeah, I feel like in a way, Dan, I've been on this soapbox for a real long time. Like if you go back in the archives, you'll find me doing webinars back in like 2010, 2011. Even before that, there was one conference where I actually gave a demo of the dark web, because I think where it starts is around education and context. I think we've done much better over the last couple of years. It seems like with the Global Data Quality Initiative and the great work from the Insights Association and other associations like ESOMAR and the MRS, I think everyone's really trying to push this to the forefront, which is really great to see, because I think in the early years of my career, it felt a little lonely, I'll be honest with you. I felt like I was on that soapbox alone and not really, didn't feel like a lot of our direct clients, which are primarily market research agencies, but also their clients, had a front row seat into what was going on. And what I always say to people is, none of us are going to solve cyber fraud. Like, it's not a solvable thing in my mind, a fully solvable thing. There is no like silver bullet or some quick fix that will make this go away. Because trust me, I have explored so many options through the years. I think in the early, more greener years of my career, I was much more optimistic and thought to myself, I can solve this. But then as you start to step back, and I think it really became quite visible and clear during COVID, and it's interesting, Tia, that happened to your brother. I'm curious, on this group here, how many of us have actually been direct victims or know a victim of cyber fraud? Raise your hand. Yeah. Like, the victim status is high in this situation. And so I think, while there is no silver bullet, there are absolutely things that we can be doing both technologically and methodologically to be more proactive and to produce a higher quality outcome for the brands, for companies like P&G. And I don't think that that's being done collectively across the ecosystem. I think a lot of corners are being cut. I think there's a race to the bottom when it comes to pricing. It's a very commoditized space. And it's interesting, Tia, that you mentioned around expert networks. So we actually acquired an expert network last year that got us into the qualitative B2B space, a company called Ivy Exec. And they have a very large community of experts, wide ranging from director plus all the way to C-level executives. And the model, the economic model for those participants is wildly different than what we see in the quantitative panel space. We have clients say, my budget's 60 cents per complete. I can't pay you any more than that. Think about what kind of quality you're going to be getting at that price point, right? And whereas in the expert network space, we're really paying participants for their valuable feedback, for their expertise. They're often participating in a qualitative online forum or IDI or focus group, and there's so many different paths to validation of those individuals. So I think that that's a really interesting kind of parallel space that we're lined up against that we should learn from. But I, kind of going back to the education and the context piece, I know I always like to sort of share some stats that really stand out to me. So there was a report that came from Imperva last year that basically said about 47% of clicks in 2022 online were not real. So 1 out of 2 clicks online is not real. Multi-billion-dollar brands, government agencies, people seeking employment relief, like all of that is at play, and people are falling victim to it. So I think it's about the recognition that there is no silver bullet, but there are absolutely things that we can do in terms of how we source, how we test, how we incentivize, how we validate using third-party sources, how we pressure test domain expertise. If you think about it, you have a bot on your iPhone. If you have an iPhone, Siri is a bot. She can tell you a lot of things about what's going on in the world. So as Gen AI, further accelerates, that certainly can be leveraged by the fraudsters, but we're finding ways to actually use AI to combat that issue. So, years back, we developed a tool called the Text Analyzer that looks at open ends in real time and assesses it for gibberish, profanity, duplication, speeding, and even measures for context. So we can discern if the response is in fact contextual to the question itself. I think that's, proven to be incredibly invaluable for us. But I think the key, Dan and team, is just to have lots and lots of layers in place, hold hands, be super transparent with your partners, with your clients, and recognize, and maybe that's a little bit of a complacent attitude, but recognize I'm not going to solve cyber fraud, but we absolutely can eliminate or at least reduce dramatically the dissonance that we're seeing in our data. All data has dissonance for sure, but it's over-indexed a great deal. And I think a lot of it is driven by price. And, when you're being squeezed on the price point, you don't have as many options. You can't afford to layer in those third-party validation checks. You can't afford to maintain a panel. You're more likely to go to the exchanges and buy essentially what is, I know we don't talk about this anymore, but we don't say river sample, but essentially our ecosystem is based on programmatic API models that emulate river sample. And so there's not enough visibility into the historic performance of that user to even be able to make an assessment or understand their proclivity to behave in a proper and high quality way once they get into the survey. So lots to unpack there, but I want to be mindful of my talk time. So I'll pass it back to you, Dan. I get all fired up here. I feel like Rocky right now.
This is great. That's what we want. Again, tons there, and I'm also really glad that we managed to figure out how to activate the chat. Apologies for all of those who were trying to chat beforehand. It's good that it's open, and it's really good to see the discussion flowing there, and some of the challenges being thrown out there. But yeah, let's now head over to you, Mel, and hear your thoughts on. Yeah, I know you're doing lots, and that's great, and we'd love to hear about some of that.
Yeah, well, so I think I can answer both of your questions that you posed, like how did we get here and how do we move forward? Because I think they're the same, honestly. I believe that how we got here is, this inability for our profession to say, we're going to establish a basic framework for quality and we're going to measure it. And we're going to have companies compete above that framework. You guys know I come from the commercial world, so I totally believe in the power of being able to compete and being able to compete on quality. But I also believe, especially in the role I have now, that as a profession, we need a foundation below which you don't compete, because that's the standard. And we haven't established that, up until this time. There has to be a base, and that base has to be measurable. And then those measurements also become the quality buying signals. I'm loving the chat and I'm loving the questions. There's questions about why can't we use GPS? We can. Why can't we do some benchmarks? We can. We just haven't. And so, we need to establish a foundation of quality. We need to have that foundation be measurable and accountable for people in our ecosystem. And then we need to have the transparency of the outcomes of those available to buyers who are willing to pay for quality if they can just find it and identify it and buy on quality buying signals. It's been hard for them to do that. So right now, some of the brands get a lot of grief because they, they're not paying much, but they really can't see the difference when they're making the buying choices on $1 versus $5. They can only see the quality on the other side of the buying process. And so then they start making different decisions, but that's very hard for them. So if we want them to be able to buy on quality and invest in quality, which they've all said they would, if we can just give them a framework against which to do so. They're not going to do it on a hope and a dream. That's not even their role at their companies. And so we have to provide that. So I think the way forward, is this defining the problem, creating common language, and then measurement. We are a measurement profession and we haven't measured this. Shame on us, right? And so we need to measure it. We're the Global Data Quality Group. Our next big effort in just a couple months is benchmarks. We're going to start with 6 very basic benchmarks. And maybe it'll be 7. Maybe it's got, we have to put it out for consultation. Our members matter. You matter. Everyone on this call is going to get an opportunity to weigh in. But we're going to start with basic benchmarks. Percent of fraud removed before the survey, percent of fraud removed post-survey, abandon rate, because the 4th leg of what Mihkel talked about is experience, right? That's the 4th leg of the problem to solve is participant experience. So abandon rate, length of interview, use of incentives and average incentives. There are things that we can and should measure. We should set benchmarks. And then you can know, if you look at a survey and you ask your provider, what's your average abandon rate? What's your average fraud rate? What's your average LOI? What's your average fill in the blank? You're going to have a base against which to measure that and have a quantitative decision about how we're doing as a profession instead of a qualitative one. That is my goal in the next year, is to move this from qualitative, feely conversations to quantitative, how are we doing discussions.
Fantastic. Thank you for that effort, you and everyone in the GDQ. Over to you, Joaquim.
I will try to build on my predecessors, and it's not easy because I really like what you have said, all of you. So our industry, according to the ESOMAR report, is estimated in $130 billion. All this money comes from end clients. End clients are the ones moving the needle. So where the end client puts the money is where the market will move to. So building on what you said, Tia, and Procter & Gamble, by the way, is an example of many good practices, so nothing to say over there. End clients have a huge responsibility in addressing this problem when selecting the right suppliers. And it's like, I'm sorry because I'm going to touch a sensitive topic, but it's like in the elections. We are complaining about the president, but in the end, it's the voters who vote for that president. So the market is the same. Where the money goes is where suppliers or the landscape will be. So, for instance, when you're asking what are we doing, so for many years, ESOMAR has been working on the questions that an end client should ask to a supplier in order to guarantee what is the quality of the service. Now we have the 37 questions to help buyers of online sample. That would be one, and it's quite related to what Melanie has just mentioned about benchmarks and KPIs, because when an end client takes a well-informed decision, not only based on price, price of course is the component, but then also let's think about the outsourcing departments of big corporations. What effect has it have when the purchasing has moved from a specialist to a specialist in purchasing and not in the field that we are treating the topic? So when looking at the whole spectrum, we can find many reasons for being the situation we are, and totally agree with Lisa in this price race to the bottom that has been extremely accelerated in the last years. On the other side, we are talking about fraud based on IT and the attacks from fraudsters and bots and so on. But there is another component, which is how are we treating participants? How are we treating participants of our panels or our surveys or our studies? Again, we are from ESOMAR, also available on the Global Data Quality Initiative. We have crafted guidelines on how to maximize the experience of participants. How are we questioning, for instance, demographic questions? How can we standardize this? So if we analyze the whole problem, we can find many different places in which we have direct responsibility, each one of us, and tackle them. So in this Global Data Quality Initiative, we are very happy in really defining all those different problems in the value chain and ask for the participation of the whole ecosystem to solve those, because it's our prestige, it's our reputation, and it's our future at stake, all of us.
Fantastic, thank you, Joaquim. And you're right, and Melanie responded in the chat as well that, like an election, we can only vote, we can only choose from those options that are presented in front of us. So yeah, it's incumbent upon all of us to create those great options. Now, finally, Mihkel, we'll come to you, and then we'll move the topic on after any additional comments from you.
Yeah, I think my observation is that maybe we want to do too much at the same time, because the quality has so many dimensions, right? You can't solve all of those things at the same time. So it's really worth to pause. Is like, okay, where do we start? What's the first step that we can do so the other dominoes can start to to fall against it. And reading, thank you everyone for all those points. I think real people has been mentioned like 25 times, and I don't think anybody can argue against that would be a bad place to start as a first thing to standardize and measure and transparently share and trade against. I mean, if we're not asking people who are real people or who don't say that who they are, you know, there's no question that that's wrong, right? And even that is not today measurable and transparently visible. So that's kind of the startup approach, is take the first step and get going with it, because that can be standardized. I'm not actually sure that many other things can be standardized. Like if you go into experience of surveys and how long they are, there's so many nuances where you actually will forever need agencies to apply their specialist knowledge to do that. So I don't know how far you can get with, you know, standardization there. But is it the real person? And make that part of every transaction? I mean, that's how you get to raise prices and weed out the people who are not real people, because then you can't run simple surveys if you have that filter on in a way that everybody agrees can be measured. So I think that's kind of the first step that we would suggest to focus on from here.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, very, very conscious of time. We've essentially only had like a couple of questions, and we already need to start thinking about closing up. So I'm going to now just mention the quality pledge, which has been published and indicated, and I think 26 companies have already signed up to in some form so far. We'll be able to share it with the various registrants, so you can take a look and decide if it's something you want to participate in. But that is an attempt to create a little bit of a movement, the beginning of a movement, similar to when climate change pledges are created or gender pay gaps are created. It's about trying to move towards some transparency. So to start publish indicators of quality, ensure that everyone understands to the best of collective knowledge what quality means, what best practice is, and also what to avoid. So let me, you know, again, just kind of ask the panelists for, I suppose, their thoughts on the idea of a quality pledge, whether it could be helpful, and also what else you'd like to see in that, or from others. And we'll mix it up a little bit this time around. So let's maybe begin with you, Lisa. You're on the top left of my screen. What are your thoughts about the idea of a pledge and to try and create that kind of momentum?
I love it. I love it. And you know, we heard it first. Innovate MR is all in. We're all in on this pledge. I really think it's so important. I'm open to internal audits. Like, come check it out. Because I think there's, you know, Joaquim's sort of centered on something that I think is really important to mention. There's an ethics issue here too. Like, we can have a very robust list of questions and send that out to every single provider in the space, and you'll get some canned responses, or some salesy responses. But I think the proof is in the pudding. It's really about the performance of the sample itself, how much you're having to invalidate, and what those results look like. So, you know, having maybe a third party, neutral party, conduct side-by-sides, and maybe not necessarily throw people under the bus, but help to elevate those that are doing it the right way. You know, I mentioned earlier, Dan, that we've done this mystery shop, and just to kind of give you a little bit of context here, you know, we looked at both B2B, healthcare, and consumer, just at the bid level. I just want to understand how we were looking at as it relates to price. And, you know, one particular target was high incidence C-level executive that has, you know, general decision-making authority around marketing decisions. And the lowest bid was $18, and the competitor average was $32 for a C-level executive. To me, that presents and points to a really broken pricing model in our industry, and an absolute race to the bottom. So I think, you know, going back to Melanie's commentary around just the participant experience, we don't want to just be left with a universe of sample participants that have the highest pain threshold. You know, our job is to represent and to project to the population. And if we are creating a dynamic that is so alienating, we have to ask ourselves, really, is it real? And I think it's important for us to come together and really start spending less time describing the problem, because I think we've all been describing the problem for far too long. And I think a pledge is a wonderful, wonderful next step, but I also think there needs to be some more meat behind it with third-party, neutral party auditing. I think that is, I've even thought, should we propose regulation? And I know there's probably a lot of mixed thoughts on that, but it's getting to a point now where that say versus do, the delta between those two dynamics, is really wide for several providers in this space. And I don't think just having them respond to questions is going to surface some of the ethical concerns I personally have and what I've observed over the last 20 years. I'll stop there. Thanks, Dan.
Go ahead, Melanie.
Yeah, I have to jump in there because she said the R word, regulation. I agree with most of what Lisa said, though. I think that the pledge is a really good tool, and I'm a big proponent of a pledge. The Global Data Quality Group was planning a pledge, and so maybe we can partner with you guys on the pledge as we move forward. But what's really important is, what is the pledge, and what are they pledging to do, and what does it mean to the profession? So that's why these benchmarks that we're developing are so important. And I love that people are talking about the benchmarks a little bit in the chat. Like the reason we're doing abandon rate is about the experience, right? That fourth leg, and LOI is about the experience. And so the benchmarks are going to be about that end-to-end process, fraud at the beginning, cleaning at the end, and the experience in the middle. So I love the idea of a pledge. We just want to make sure that the pledge has something behind it of what exactly they're pledging to do. And then there's some sort of a measurement process to prove that they are actually doing it, and that they're doing it in a high quality way, that, that the data that they're giving about quality is quality data, and that there's some way to check that data and make sure that it's good. And then as a profession, use all of that data to just make really good recommendations on how to improve this. Like, one of the things that we literally just put out late last year was a requirement that every survey going forward have a secure end link. Like, why didn't we do that 5 years ago? It's time to put structure around this conversation. It's time to put data around it. It's time to put measurement around it, and then it's time to get everybody to pledge. I don't want to go the regulation route, because the regulators have no idea what our business is like. They won't know how to regulate it, and they'll regulate it wrong, and we should regulate it ourselves. And so that is really what the professional bodies are going to do together. We're going to help self-regulate this, and the regulations can come through the trade bodies.
Fantastic. Henry Ford said that quality means doing it right when no one is looking, and there's variations on that, but that's kind of who you are. Any additional thoughts from Tia?
Yeah, I'm. This is another one where I'll poke the bear a little bit, because I can. I would think, like, what good is a pledge if somebody's putting profit over ethics? We talked about ethics being part of it, and when you've got, this is akin to, every 4 years, the president puts his hand on the Bible here in the United States and then swears an oath of office to the Constitution, and then turns around and pisses on the Constitution, and doesn't follow what it says. So, if we put profit over ethics, and we've gotten into this place, how can we self-regulate? That's like me saying, I'm driving home from work tonight, and I get home and a police officer asked me if I sped at all when I was driving home. Do you think I'm going to tell him so he can write me a ticket? And so it's like, I don't know. I think once we get all of the details of what the pledge is or how we can do it, I don't know if self-regulation or self-audit is the right way. I do agree that we shouldn't have an external regulators who don't know anything about the business doing, audits or whatever. But at the same time, self-audits aren't necessarily going to get us there. I've had too many suppliers obfuscate and do things that, or say that they're selling me, sample that's been checked with a fraud detection tool, when they subscribe to the fraud detection tool and don't use it, or they turn it on at such a level that a mosquito can get through a chain link fence. So I don't know how to solve it, and I don't know what the pledge looks like. I'm willing to take a look under the hood and figure out, what I can do on my part. I'm skeptical because it just keeps going on and on and on, and there just doesn't seem to be any end in sight.
That's fantastic, and we really appreciate the poking that you do. Now, really conscious of time, so Caroline, and anything you want to comment upon?
I'm a big fan of the pledge idea. However, this reminds me a little bit, show my age now, of the .com bubble and how that burst. I played in that space. We do lack standardization of what metrics define good. So I love Melanie's 6 benchmarks. I think we need that, and we need to be held accountable to measuring them. I'm all in on that. I also think we need to be careful not to suppress innovation while we're doing this, though, because what we love to do in the market research industry, and I've worked in this for over 30 years now, so I'm as guilty as anyone on this, is we love to overanalyze and talk about things, and then the world moves on without us. So, I was over at our client advisory board meeting in New York 2 weeks ago, and there was a lot of topic about synthetic data and synthetic panels. So whether we like it or not, we are going to have to have a point of view on that. And so yes, clear benchmarks, clear accountability from measuring data, but not to the point where it suppresses innovation. And I'm going to reinforce what Lisa said, and everyone keeps saying, this cannot be at the expense of continually commoditizing the real people who share their precious time and data with us. We are killing our opportunity to actually get real answers from real people through that. It has to stop. So it's kind of a lean into the clients. Tia, you're representing on the call today. Let's get out of this commoditization, because you're not going to get good quality answers from good quality people if it continues the way it's going.
Fantastic. So lesson for me, there's 6 strong voices, there's 60 minutes, and a topic like quality. Yes, this should be a one-day conference, not a 60-minute attempt to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour and solve all the problems. So I think we can close by saying, I'm glad that we've hosted this discussion and that we've had such lively participation from the panelists and also in the chat. I think what we'll commit to is we'll definitely do a write-up of this and some bite-sized pieces, because I think there's a number of other questions and comments that have been raised that definitely deserve a deeper exploration. So we'll follow up with you all. We should absolutely do another one, so to continue discussion. I don't know that we've got a specific date in mind, but we won't let it run on too much. And Joaquim, you have your hand raised.
And can I say something just before closing?
Absolutely.
Just to build on everything that has been said, that I totally buy, and I support Melanie's point of view. I would like to say a couple of things. One is that I estimate that there might not be more than 100 people in the world, non-for-profit, working to elevate and defend our profession. I would say even less than 100 people. So we are not so many. So all initiatives and all energies coming from the ecosystem are extremely welcome. I would like that we are united in working together, because that's when we can be effective, when we are united working together. Otherwise, we're just scattering efforts. And as I said, there are not so many of us working 100% of our time defending the profession in a non-for-profit matter. So let's work together, the institutions and the marketplace, as you are now fostering this initiative.
Thank you, Joaquim. And thank you, everybody. Thanks to all the panelists. Thanks for everybody who stayed with us. And we will be in touch and we will continue this discussion. Thank you all.